So, the Invincible universe has some of the craziest superpowered individuals, but the ones who stand out the most are the Viltrumites, and these guys has a lot of history, and why wouldn't they? After all, these guys created and ruled the biggest and strongest empire in the known universe. But many details about the Viltrumites' history are still missing, and I think this will be a great opportunity to introduce all of you to the lore of the Viltrumites and their empire. So, the Viltrumites originate from a lush and beautiful world that they named Viltrum. Their planet had a carbon-rich atmosphere and gravity 1.25 times that of Earth, and was twice the size of it. It was once rich in resources, but the natural wealth of Viltrum had long been depleted. Viltrum was renowned for its verdant rainforests and surreal glass deserts, but was plagued by earthquakes and methane storms. The prime inhabitants of Viltrum are the Viltrumites, an advanced humanoid race of immense physical power and imperial ambitions who dominated Viltrum. Each Viltrumite could fly and possessed incredible strength, speed, and invulnerability, as well as other superhuman powers. Viltrumites aged very slowly as well and lived for thousands of years. The Viltrumites' physical power and immortality had strongly influenced their society and created a species-wide superiority complex and the sense that they were destined to rule lesser beings. So, hundreds of thousands of years ago, before they set off to conquer the stars, a growing portion of their society reached the conclusion that their godlike physical power and near immortality gave them not only the right, but the duty to govern over the lesser beings that surrounded them. When their opponents rebuked their ideals, those Viltrumites who valued strength embarked on a horrific task. They expunged all Viltrumites that they perceived to be weak or unfit in a planet-wide civil war. Years later, 1/2 of the population was decimated, and the once beautiful planet of Viltrum stood in ruins after the events of the war that would eventually be remembered as the Great Purge. Soon, the survivors adopted a brutal doctrine of eugenics. They created several selective breeding programs in order to ensure that only the strongest of their kind would survive and continue to prosper on Viltrum. From the ruins of the Purge rose a new race, a race of brutal conquerors made up of the strongest and most cunning survivors of the Great War, and so the Viltrumite Empire was born. Now, with their affairs at home in order, the Viltrumites turned their attention to their neighbors on the planets that surrounded them. Led by the strongest and wisest of their number, Lord Argol, the Viltrumites created the organization responsible for the galactic expansion of the Empire, and this world-conquering committee chose its planets seemingly at random at first, but soon a pattern could be discerned and was always the same. Planets capable of space travel were targeted for assimilation and were offered a chance to willingly submit to Viltrumite rule. Those that refused were destroyed by an army of flying supermen. After thousands of years, the Viltrumite Empire encompassed dozens of planets. As people, they were feared and reviled throughout the known galaxy. Their absolute domination of the galaxy seemed inevitable until a single Viltrumite rebelled against his people. Vadus, whose conscience would not allow him to stand by and watch his people subjugate and oppress their neighbors, secretly assembled a coalition to oppose their Viltrumite masters. The coalition tried for many years to stop the Viltrumite wave, but was met with failure after failure. Eventually, his scientists synthesized a deadly virus from Theodos's blood that proved to be fatal to other Viltrumites. The virus, renamed the Scourge, was released in secret on Viltrum. The previously unstoppable supermen began to perish in droves due to either the sickness that was brought on by the virus or at the hands of physical violence that they could not withstand in their weakened condition. Worse still, though the exact circumstances and reasons are unknown, Argol was assassinated near or during the time that the Scourge Virus was ravaging the Viltrumite population. In less than a single year, 99.9% of the Viltrumite race fell victim to the virus. The Viltrumites that survived the Scourge became immune to the deadly virus and slowly regained their awesome strength. One of the survivors, Thrag, seized control and thinking quickly concocted a cunning plan that would allow them to retain control of their empire. He forced the surviving Viltrumites to conceal their actual numbers and cut the planet Viltrum off from any outside visitors. He then hid the remains of every Viltrumite that fell to the Scourge on and around the planet, transforming it into the largest mass grave ever seen in the galaxy. The surviving Viltrumites then set about spreading rumors. Those said that the rapid expansion of the Empire had stretched their supply lines far too thin. Those said that the Empire no longer had the ability to dispatch an army of supermen to each planet they wanted to conquer. Instead, Viltrumites went to the most warlike of the Empire's conquered planets, and they conscripted their military forces as the new ground troops for the Viltrumites' continued expansion. But even with these measures in place, Thrag and the remains of the World Conquering Committee realized that it was only a matter of time before the galaxy realized that the Empire's power was only an illusion. With that realization, the remaining Viltrumites hatched a single desperate plan. Thrag, along with his advisors, handpicked the most potent soldiers from the remaining Viltrumites, and he dispatched them to planets whose native population had the most potential to provide viable Viltrumite offspring, in the hopes of bolstering their numbers once more. Their search lasted for decades, and the results of it were disappointing until the Viltrumite Nolan found a small blue planet called Earth. Nolan's exploits on the planet Earth were well documented in the Empire, but when it came to their attention that he had abandoned his post, an assault team of Viltrumites was sent to confront him and discover why. The Viltrumite assault team confronted Nolan on a planet inhabited by a race of insect-like bipeds who called themselves Thraxans. To their collective shock, they discovered that Nolan had produced not one but two sons during his absence from the Empire. Moreover, the eldest son, who was the resulting combination of human and Viltrumite DNA, was every bit as powerful and capable as a pure-blooded Viltrumite. Nolan and his son Mark, aka Invincible, put up a valiant fight against the Viltrumite assault team, but were eventually defeated. As a result, Nolan was taken into custody, and Mark was given his post on Earth. With Nolan's apparent defection, Thrag realized that he had little time to act before rumors started about the cohesiveness of the Empire, so he sent word to his scattered people and bade them to return home. At the same time, he sent one of his more capable warriors, Anissa, to the Earth to persuade Invincible to convert to their side. Despite her eloquent and logical argument for their side, Invincible turned down their offer of allegiance to the Empire. Upon Invincible's refusal, Thrag decided to take stronger measures, and he sent his most powerful agent, Conquest, to Earth. It was during this time that Nolan escaped from the Viltrumite prison where he was being held. Thrag knew that Nolan had no allies but the Coalition to turn to, and therefore the Coalition would soon discover that the Empire's strength was an illusion. So, Thrag greatly accelerated his plans and ordered his remaining forces to engage the coalition of planets' forces directly. Despite the intensity that his conscripted armies fought with, they slowly lost ground to the allied coalition forces. What was even worse is that Conquest met his first real defeat at Invincible's hands on Earth. He returned in defeat and begged for mercy from Thrag and his peers. Instead of executing Conquest for his failure, Grand Regent Thrag ordered him to act on information that was fed to the Viltrumites by a traitor within the Coalition forces. The Viltrumites had discovered that the recently liberated Nolan had returned to Earth to recruit his sons for the Coalition's war effort. Thrag instructed Conquest to intercept and destroy the Coalition ship that was ferrying the Grayson family, including Nolan and his two sons Mark and Oliver, back to Coalition space. So, Conquest, along with a pair of Viltrumite warriors, intercepted the starship as planned, but by the conclusion of the battle, both Conquest and the Graysons went inexplicably missing. Working under the assumption that both Conquest and the Graysons had all perished during the confrontation, the Viltrumites committed the majority of their forces to an all-out attack on the Coalition's home world of Taliskria. The Viltrumite forces attacked the Coalition headquarters with no less than 10 of the remaining Viltrumites present. But despite their well-calculated plan, their forces had to retreat because it turned out that the Graysons were alive and they had brought many allies of Coalition with them. So the Coalition forces eventually overpowered and destroyed the Viltrumites' extra-military forces. Unfortunately for the retreating Viltrumites, Phaedus had the same idea. Theodus gathered the most powerful members of the coalition, the Graysons, Alan the Alien, the Earthborn hero Tech Jacket, the Space Racer, and the being only known as Battle Beast, in order to prepare an ambush for the retreating Viltrumites on the planet of their birth. It was only Thrag's quick thinking that allowed the gathered Viltrumite forces to reach Viltrum before the Coalition strike team. As the most powerful members of the Coalition arrived in Viltrum's orbit, Thrag unleashed the entirety of the surviving Viltrumites against them. The battle was as brutal as it was fast, and it resulted in several casualties. The surviving Viltrumites numbered in the low 30s, and the planet of Viltrum itself was destroyed. Thrag himself beheaded Theodus for his treachery and maimed the Grayson family. He eviscerated Nolan, crippled Oliver, beat Invincible unconscious, and left all three for dead in the darkness of space. And it was only Thrag's intense desire to preserve the Viltrumite race that made him hesitate to murder the treacherous Grayson family. Instead, he and his remaining people abandoned the Empire and traveled to Earth. Thrag waited patiently for the Graysons to return to Earth, and 2 weeks later, his patience was rewarded by Invincible's presence. Thrag left his place of hiding and confronted Invincible in the skies. He negotiated a peace treaty between the now hidden Viltrumite people on Earth and the Coalition forces. It was a simple treaty. The Viltrumites would surrender their claim on the Empire and its resources and halt all hostilities. In return, they would remain on Earth and rebuild their people. If the Coalition refused, they would raise Earth into dust. Left with little choice, Invincible agreed to Thrag's terms on behalf of the Coalition. Despite all of the turmoil and chaos that had befallen them, the Viltrumites had endured. They had been given a second chance and a second home. According to Thrag's plan, their numbers would grow and swell, and when they had reached critical mass, their empire would be reborn, and this time their expansion will begin from Earth. This didn't go as planned, because Nolan turned out to be the heir of their emperor Argol, and Thrag was exiled. After his exile, Thrag traveled in space for weeks, and he soon came across the planet Thraxa, the same planet that Omni-Man used to rule. Thrag killed the previous monarch of the planet and instantly became their new monarch. He then started his plan by mating with thousands of Thraxan females, and Thrag then created his own army of Viltrumite Thraxan hybrid and attacked the coalition of planets. Even though Thrag had his own army, he never viewed them as his children or even as Viltrumites because of their hybrid genes, which he considered a weakness. To him, his children were just a workforce, and he didn't care how many of them died. Soon, Omni-Man and Invincible also got involved in this war once again, after Thrag tried to assassinate their family. So, after a long war, Thrag and Omni-Man lost their lives, and Invincible was crowned as the new emperor of the Viltrumites. Thousands of Thrag's children survived, and they joined the new Viltrumite Empire, but this time Invincible was leading the Empire in a better direction. So, yeah, this was the history, as well as some biology of the Viltrumite race. So yeah, that's all for this video, and thanks for watching.